All right. Well, I think we're recording now. So I decided to make a return to doing some blogging. Well overdue in putting something together. And I was actually thinking about doing something because I got a very heartfelt, interesting email from one of our team members, kind of a younger guy, just under 30 years old, and he was asking me what it was like to operate and work within a recession. And I guess a lot of people are thinking now about the impending recession that we're in and what's it going to mean. And I decided that I should probably not just respond to his email, but I actually thought about maybe there's other people in our teams and in our community, I guess, feeling like this. And maybe there's a duty of care. Someone, an old timer like me who's been around the last recession, could share some thoughts and insights and perspective. So I decided to write a blog. And as I started to write the blog, I was actually thinking a lot about the elements that I felt personally got me through and a lot of the people that I knew through the last recession. And I started thinking about sort of the power of positive thinking and manifesting opportunities for yourself purposefully through mindset. And I started to think about my very good friend, Ciaran Byrne. And so I asked Ciaran, would he join me for a Zoom chat? Because Kieran's not just one of my closest friends, but he's a pretty amazing guy. He's a very successful, very creative entrepreneur. He's been in business with me. We've done some deals together in the past. We'll probably talk about that today. But more recently, he's really impressed the hell out of me and really showed the color of what he is as a human being by recently overcoming leukemia. And I think it's fair to say, my personal thought is that part of his battle and his journey successfully coming through leukemia has been down to his outlook on life. And he's a very, very interesting and inspiring person. So I said, much better any blog than I would write, I'd ask Ciaran to come on and have a chat. So he's here today. How are you, Ciaran?
Hey, Tony. Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, feeling great.
Do you think that was a fair introduction to the man that is Ciaran Byrne?
It was impressive. I haven't had an introduction like that before. So yeah, you know what? I'll take that any day. They were very kind words. Accurate.
Yeah.
Well, very
Modest and accurate. But look, just to set the scene, right? So Ciaran, you and I were in business together. You started the business in 2003 with another good friend of ours called Ross McMahon. And it was kind of a spin out from DCU where you were in college. And I think you set it up in about 2003. And I think I joined you somewhere around 2005, and we did some great things. We raised some money, and we got out into the market, and we actually pulled in some very impressive investors, and we pulled in some very impressive customers. And I think we were flying it really up until we were met with that global economic recession. And both of us found ourselves in a position where we had to survive and move on and get through that recession. And you know, we were always in good contact and sharing ideas and sharing the projects that we were working on. But I'd love to start by just getting your thoughts on your mindset, Ciaran, when we found ourselves in that recession. It was quite probably accurate to say we didn't know what was ahead of ourselves, how bad it was going to be. There was talk about a recession, but to be honest with you, I don't know if you were like me, Ciaran, I found some of the talking about it to be quite abstract and didn't really know what it would mean to be in a recession and to try and, you know, survive and do something and grow and pay the bills. But I'm keen to talk to you about back then, what were the kind of conversations you were having with yourself in the terms of, you know, believing what you wanted to achieve was possible? How did you keep yourself on your journey in those days?
Yeah, you know, that they were strange days, and you know, they were I guess at the time we were being, you know, the entrepreneurs that we are, we really thought that thought that we could fight our way through, I guess, the tsunami that was about to hit us. I remember us sitting down doing our sales strategy and marketing strategy and doubling down on the companies we wanted to approach. And of course, they were all in the construction sector, which was to be particularly decimated in Ireland anyway. And so, you know, we really felt at a moment that we could get through this with sheer persistence and determination. And I guess what looking back on it now, I realized that words that were offered to us, I think, by one of the investors was that, you know, guys, you have no idea what's coming here. And I feel that was true. At the time, I felt like, you know, maybe we could have done things differently in that moment. But now looking back on it, the truth is all the customers we were selling to went out of business literally overnight. And the market just disappeared overnight. And so I feel that, you know, we did a lot of things right. And ultimately, if the market hadn't have gone the way it went, I feel we would have continued to build on that success. But, you know, when you don't have that runway and when the market disappears, you're just left high and dry. And that's essentially where we were left. I had just bought my first house, or built my first home, and I had a colossal mortgage, and I found myself at a situation where I was jobless, and it was quite bleak and very, very quickly evolving the situation of just the recession that we were facing into. So, you know, there was a moment there where it was quite bleak, yeah.
And tell me, like, both of us found ourselves in that situation. We're like, okay, this is not ideal. It's not great. But you know, the need to persevere and make things happen just drives you on. You sometimes don't get the time to sort of intellectualize about what, you know, do I have the right stuff? Will I make it? Will my plan be good enough? You just go out there and try and make things happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, when you did have those moments, and everyone has them, Ciaran, where you're kind of, you know, I almost call it like having a conversation with yourself. Sometimes, you know, you do it in the shower or in front of the mirror when you're shaving. Although it doesn't look like you shave anymore now, does it?
No. Okay, sure.
But I always find that's the time where you're kind of thinking about the day and, you know, almost not getting too carried away about, you know, a mantra or whatever. But that would be always the bit where, for me personally, I would check in with myself and say, what's going to happen today? How am I going to do well today? And like, what did you get into any rituals or find yourself any habits there that would kind of you would use to align your thinking?
Well, you know, it's interesting touching on that because, you know, I remember a time and I was sitting on my bed and I got emotional and I got upset and the tears were flowing and reflecting kind of on where I was. But yet in that moment, even I could feel the fire of determination burning inside to say, you know what, I'm going to keep going here. There might have been an opportunity to try to go into the safer confines of the software world. But I really felt that there was a different path for me. And you know, I felt even at that moment, just this sense of determination. And you talk about giving yourself pep talks and you do have to do that. You know, you have to look at yourself. I love it in sport. They talk about having an honesty with yourself. You know, could I have given more in that game? And you need to be honest. And I really feel that, you know, I sat down and I said to myself, you know, is this it? You know, where do I go from here? What can I do? And it's tough. I mean, it's not easy to just dust yourself off and get up again. But I mean, that's what separates the people who succeed from the people who struggle maybe to succeed is that perseverance and persistence. And so what I did was I regrouped. I realized that, you know, there were still some previous contacts that I had, and I could put my software skills to use and just build on that. And I resolved to do that and to start generating an income to start paying that big mortgage and get myself back up on my feet.
Yeah. And tell me, in that time, Ciaran, did you kind of, you know, some people when they when they make a plan and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. Sometimes they can sometimes over question it, right? And sometimes they don't give themselves the time to make it happen and get the progress. They can sometimes flip and flop. Oh, I'm going to do this. Well, there's nobody's biting on it now. I'll just do something else and do something else. And sometimes they fail for that reason, right? Did
Yeah.
you ever find yourself having conversations there? Because you basically set up another business called ClickAhead, right? Where you
Yeah.
took your skills and sort of repackaged them, remarketed them. How long were you on that track before you sort of said, I'm actually starting to get some momentum here, some success here, some revenue here. I feel like I'm making progress now.
Well, you know what I found in ClickAhead, it's that it really connected me back with, and you've always been a great man for this, which is the human connection and the relationship between people. I think that when I was starting off in business, I always tried to put on a persona which maybe didn't suit me, of being nearly very professional to the point of maybe cold.
Yeah.
And with ClickAhead and with the recession, what I realized was that people, and you taught me this too, is that people buy from people. And I started reconnecting with people and building up a relationship that transcended work. And I went to them and I was like, look, you can give these contracts to bigger companies, but I'm absolutely going to fight for your business. I'm going to stay awake at night. I'm gonna really fight for this business. I care about it. It means that to me, and that passion is something that, when you're a small business or even in a climate where maybe it's difficult to do business, that passion can win you a lot of business over the other guy. And so I did that, and what I found was that I had customers who then would refer me on to other customers. And I always had honest conversations with them, and they did question about me being a solo operator, but ultimately it was about what you can deliver and can you back up your words. And I could, and I took great pride in the software that I delivered. And I think that really stood to me over the time. And before I knew it, I had grown a successful business that was generating a very good income.
Yeah. You said a couple of things there that are very interesting and actually part of what I talk to people about every day almost. So if you think about sort of the world I come from nowadays, Ciaran, it's very made up by sort of young managers, because we have this philosophy about finding talent, developing it, and then we almost like have a duty of care to give it the opportunity to be promoted and climb the ladder. And that's usually somebody comes in as a kind of a sales rep and then becomes a manager. And one of the things that I always look for in sort of that ramping is, where you get managers, they don't know the playbook. They're not very confident in their own skills, their own personality, perhaps as a leader. So they assume these personas, right?
Yeah.
They think that they're Alan Sugar or Donald Trump or whoever. And they almost nearly need to have a kind of an up against the wall moment and break down a little bit, and then actually start realizing that the only way to lead people is actually to be open and honest about some of your vulnerabilities, to be open and honest about where your skills lie and where you need to have a team or support or leverage other people. And it's interesting that you felt that you got to that point in that stage, and it actually turned out, from what you're saying, to be something that sort of galvanized your business and then your referral base and helped you kind of multiply.
Yeah, and it's funny that you touched on some of these personas, because I was going through the stage of Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs had a persona of this guy who kicks ass and was a perfectionist, and I felt I nearly was enamored by that. And I've come to realize you don't need to be like that to succeed in life. And in fact, a lot of the very successful people are the totally opposite of that. Sometimes, so it's really important to be respectful of people, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't smile and have a laugh and introduce a bit of humor into your dealings maybe, and understand that, some of my customers in Europe, when we would have conversation, I'd learn about their lives, and you come to realize that they have a life outside work,
Yeah,
and so what you're selling them should be ultimately a means to improve their overall life, because if
yeah,
they can do what they can do better, well, then
yeah,
they can spend more time with their kids or walking their dog or going home and doing the things that's important to them. And so I wish I had known that earlier. I think I learned a lot of that from you, but really, when we were working together, my role was more technical, and when I was out on my own, I had to reconnect maybe with the business development and sales side of things.
yeah,
And in the recessionary climate, I think it really, it just made more sense.
yeah.
Human
Yeah.
decency made more sense, you know.
Yeah, it totally. I mean, it's actually it's not even just good for business, but actually, if you've got a good connection where you've developed a relationship the way you've just outlined it there, where you try and spend the time to understand the people you're dealing with and what's important to them, it actually manifests and ends up developing a relationship that not only just can bring you business, but can actually get you through some bad times. So I can
Yeah,
think of a million, and I don't necessarily want to transmit them, but a million times, Ciaran, that I've made mistakes, and they could have been complete calamities, and they weren't. They were diverted from being such because there was a good relationship with either our customer or some of our stakeholders, and say, well, I know that guy, I know his intentions, I don't think that was intentional, that was a mistake. And they then choose to see the benefit of the doubt for you, actually, which is not something you could ever bank on if you didn't purposefully intentionally try and work on those relationships and in trying to build your dealings the way you've just described them. But anyway, moving on there,
yeah,
it's your story is great and how you got up and going. You then not only got that business up and running, but you actually launched another business with another guy, another friend of yours, actually, which was a fun business. But you actually took it from nothing to be quite big and exciting. And I was reading about it in the paper and seeing all the campaigns you were doing on social media. But I think people maybe watching this would love to know where you came up with the idea of what that business is about and how you managed to juggle that business with what you were doing with your ClickAhead business.
yeah. That was a fun business. Myself and a good friend that Fabio. I was going to Christmas party one year, and I was looking for one of those ugly Christmas jumpers. Couldn't get one, and I guess the entrepreneurial flair kicked in, and we decided to get some manufactured. So we launched a business, Funky Christmas Jumpers.com, which I've now exited. But we started manufacturing and selling novelty Christmas jumpers. And bear in mind, this was 12 years ago. At a time when these jumpers didn't exist. I mean, they're everywhere now, but that was a great business because we could put into play the real benefit of PR. And we managed to get the jumpers on some good celebrities, some One Direction, the boy bands. Scott Disick would be known from the Kardashian
Yeah,
fame, and a lot of good public relations exercises, I guess, were undertaken there. But it was a great business, and again, that was great because from an e-commerce point of view, we managed to sell across. God, there was a significant volume of jumpers, and this was pre-Instagram days. Really, Facebook and online were the only sales channels. But I think ultimately I realized that was a distraction from the software side of things. So come November, December, I was very much focused on having fun selling these jumpers, and it was
yeah.
difficult to close out some software projects. So unfortunately, one of them had to go, and I had to focus on the bigger picture, I guess.
You sold your interest. Now you did very well on it, and like
Yeah.
I said, I was reading about it. There was stuff in the paper about that, and then who the celebrities were, and it's fair to say that like your outlook of confidence and purposefully kind of seeing opportunities and not being shackled by why things won't work got you going and that. And I think just jumping in sort of the next chapter, Ciaran, which I think people will find very interesting to talk about. But it's fair to say, I was very lucky to go to your wedding, which was a year and a half ago.
Yeah, but we've got 2018. Sorry, so
So 2 years ago this summer, right?
2 years ago. Yes, yeah,
Yeah, and like it was fair to say you were flying on top of the world, Ciaran.
yeah.
Everything was going well. We were there with all our friends, and all our friends were married and doing well, and all the kids were there. And I remember thinking it was such a great wedding. I think I said this to you at the time. It's like, God, life has just, we've all done well, and we're all happy, and we're probably luckier than we deserve to be in some ways, and all is good. And then I think you had a bit of time between your wedding and your honeymoon.
That's right. Yeah.
But when you went on your honeymoon, it's fair to say you weren't feeling great, and you had a feeling that there was something up.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on, like, the wedding was the best weekend of my life. I really had a blast, and we all did, I think. And business was flying. I had closed 2 or 3 significant deals, one in Benelux, another one in Scandinavia, and things were going well. But what I didn't realize under the hood was things weren't going so well, I guess. And I had recurring, just general sense of being unwell, colds and flus and the likes, and feeling tired. And this was around December. So I got married in May 2018, and around December, I wasn't feeling well. And then in the January, then I went off my honeymoon. We had we split it up, so we had a lovely honeymoon after the Christmas, and we were coming back getting ready to get stuck into 2019 and all its glory, and take on those contracts, hire some developers and so on. And then I went for just a precautionary examination, because I hadn't been feeling that great, thinking nothing of it. And I was diagnosed later that same day with leukemia.
Right. And tell me, in your head, did you feel that you were that sick? Did you think there was anything like in the spectrum of what you
Yeah.
thought you did?
So many people, I used to think, did they know they were that sick? And I didn't think it was something like that. I thought there might have been, Ciaran, you've a dodgy heart here, you're overworked, you're stressed, cholesterol or something, but not on a scale of seriousness. Even at that, I thought maybe look, I'd enjoyed my wedding, Christmas. I'd had a few beers. I thought, I've done something to my liver, but I mean, it's funny, because looking back, you can always connect the dots, and it all makes sense. But at that moment in time, I didn't see it, and I didn't see that trend had been going down for a significant period of time, weeks and months, in relation to my own wellness and my own health. And I just didn't see it, because I was too focused on work. And the next big thing, and I did not see that I had neglected myself and my well-being.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, Ciaran, about, you obviously go through a couple of different ranges of emotion when you get news like that. And I remember you ringing me literally from the hospital that night. What a shock it was. But I mean, I'd imagine the first stage of it is just being in shock for a period of time, and then trying to absorb what it means, and what the outlook was. And I remember when we were talking at the time, like, you had a consultant doctor who really sort of, like, he didn't sugarcoat it, right? He gave you the news, and he told you what was a possible outcome. And he didn't really, from, I mean, looking outsider over your shoulder from what you told me, he didn't really give you much chance to start trying to get optimistic in your head at that point, did he?
Yeah, like, you don't have a playbook in your mind about, if something like this happens, what am I going to do? So you don't know how you're going to handle it. And when we had that fateful day in January with a consultant, and And he said to me in the first 10 minutes, look here, we could be talking about 3 weeks, 3 weeks being, you know, to live. And, you know, at that moment of time, you get very upset. I mean, that's the first emotion, the tsunami of just emotion. And I remember apologizing to Denise. I felt bad that I had, I guess, you know, you're at the point where you're supposed to be building your future in your first year of marriage, and I felt that I had destroyed all that, and so I felt really just distraught and emotional and so on, and it was a very surreal, upsetting moment. And I guess what happened next was interesting, because I don't know whether it was being an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur, we associate with business, right? But like, maybe it's the skills that we associate being an entrepreneur, or the personality traits that I had, that, like, to begin with, I just, in that moment, right, even then, I realized that, look, this isn't something that I can do on my own, you know, and with business in the past, I had kind of done things on my own, but at that moment, I was like, look, I need everyone around me here. I need my family. I need my friends. I need help. I need to reach out and be honest with people, and tell them what's happening here. And I need to really embrace that. And it literally happened in that moment. What the doctor consult, my family came up, the consultant left the room, and we were all very upset. I thought I could leave the hospital, and he said, no, look here, we have to start intensive chemotherapy straight away. You're not leaving the hospital for the foreseeable future. You kind of go straight upstairs to the oncology, hematology ward, and we need to get stuck into your chemotherapy. So, you know, I just straight away started, I think you were one of the very first, I texted and called, and we spoke, and I got great comfort out of that, and I started reaching out, and it just went from there. You kind of start putting together this battle plan of and just this laser focus on what do we have to get out of this situation, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember it so vividly. But and tell me, Ciaran, like did you sort of intentionally say, look, I'm going to come out to the side of this. I'm choosing now to start thinking thoughts and building
Yeah.
a day and building an outlook. Like, did you actually say, like, I'm building this plan in my head?
Yeah, you know, I quickly realized that you can't go on Google. You can't look stuff up, because you're just going to upset yourself, and you're going to be terrified. I didn't understand chemotherapy medicines, and they give you leaflets to read about side effects and stuff. I didn't want to read that. What I could focus on was my attitude. And you know, the funny thing is, okay, here's something. When you're told you have cancer or leukemia, some people, when they hear that news, or any news in life, their mindset changes, and straight away they start feeling sick. But I didn't really feel sick before I was delivered that news. And straight after it, I've been hit with this news, and I went, but I still feel like I felt 10 minutes ago. I was having a joke earlier on today, and my mindset just went back to, I still feel okay. I mean, physically, I know I'm unwell, but I feel, and the positivity, like, I started saying to people, God, I still feel good, and people start saying to me, geez, you know, Ciaran, you're going to be great. And I said, I really feel like I'm going to be great. And I actually went back and I looked at my text messages from that period of time, and all the messages I had from my friends and family, and the messages back from me saying, guys, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to be fine. You know, I'm feeling really positive about this. And that cycle of positive reinforcement just builds and builds and builds. And one of the text messages I sent to my family, I think it was, said, I'm going to be, so this was in March, I started my chemotherapy, and I said, I'm going to be finished this, and I'm going to be out the other side by my birthday, April 23rd. And actually on that day, I went for my transplant, which was ultimately the end result of this. So in a way, I was right, and I kind of visualized the end path. I mean, and people were saying, "Oh, look, the end of the summer next year," and I said,
Yeah.
"I forget it." You know, I said, "I'm going straight at this," and yeah, and I could feel that come over me, and I knew I could control that
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah.
I knew I could keep going there, and I couldn't control the medicine, and I couldn't control any of that stuff. And so I said, look, give me the medicine, give me whatever it takes to cure me. But I could control my attitude and surround myself with people who are going to lift me and help me get through this. Great friends like yourself and my family, and that's something that I very consciously tried to do. So, you know,
That's
thankfully it seemed to have good results. Yeah.
it clearly did. And
Yeah.
how long are you technically like in remission now, or
So
cured? What's the language and the lingo there?
yeah, so like so ultimately I had my chemotherapy last year, and I then did the ultimate result to improve the chance of relapse was decided for my course of treatment to be a bone marrow transplant. So, you know, this time last year I was in a hospital having that transplant. I was
Yeah.
actually at this moment in time going through an extremely intense, probably the most intense form of chemotherapy you can get for 7 days that completely wiped out my bone marrow. And on the 30th of April, I got my transplant. So since then, it's coming up to a year post transplant, and I feel better than I've ever felt. You know, my bloods are really positive. I had a checkup last week. I first time out in 2 years cycling on a bike for any great distance last night, and it's just been incredible in terms of the journey back to where I am today talking to you.
And Ciaran, I think you and I have spoken a lot just about how your world kind of, I think you explained it like this: your reality was like these point A to point B here before all this, and now
Yeah.
it's just expanded. And you've had lots of conversations with yourself in that journey about, at lower points, will I make it, and force yourself into
Mm.
into seeing the good thing. But like, what are the things that you will now have as your sort of toolkit or your outlook on life that you feel you
Yeah.
wouldn't have had not going through that experience?
Yeah, I mean, and it's very interesting you mentioned the word toolkit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because you do need to have a toolkit. You know, even in this moment of time, what I find interesting is, so before this, I used to suffer maybe from anxiety. And what I found was that it was only in the moments of anxiety or stress or that you'd say, God, I need to do something to fix this.
Yeah.
And actually that's the wrong approach, because what you need to do is to develop that toolkit and that plan before you get into that moment.
Yeah.
So that when you are in that moment, then you have the tools that you've developed to help you
Yeah.
get out of it and move on from it. And
Yeah.
that's a mistake that a lot of us make, is that it's only in that moment. And then of course what happens is that you pass out of that moment and everything seems to be great again. So you don't feel the need to go back and invest in your toolkit.
Yeah.
And I guess what I've learned from all this is that, you know, positive mindsets are hugely important. They can change the dynamic, but it's okay not to be positive. But what is not okay is to keep that to yourself, and to hold that, and people talking about, you know, the current climate we're in, and a lot of people are feeling stress and anxiety. And I saw an analogy of talking about stress where it's like holding that bottle of water straight out, and the longer you hold it, the heavier your arm is going to get, until eventually it's going to ache, you can't hold it anymore. And it's a bit like that. And that's why it's important to, you know, going back to where I was and found that toolkit, to now talk to people. I talk a lot more openly now about my feelings, and I talk
Mm-hmm.
about how I'm feeling with my family and with yourself and with my friends, and I allow them in to help me, and I take the advice on board. I take time out more, and it's given me an incredible perspective on just the importance of various different things in life.
Yeah.
Um, and what I would say to people is to recognize the trends, you know, because 1 or 2 days being down, it's okay. 1 or 2 days of having something on your shoulders is it that you know that's fine. But to go for a long period of time feeling that way, it's ultimately going to get you in one way or another. And so it's important to recognize that earlier on, and to, focus on how can I resolve that. And for me, it's I'm more emotional now. I cry more, which I never did before. The day of my wedding, I think you saw me outside the church, and I was biting like it was going to come off because I didn't want to cry in front of people.
Yeah, well, you did walk off outside the church, and I was thinking. I said it to one of your brothers. I think he might be doing a runner. I'm
a
not
lot
sure
of
what's
people
going
thought I
on.
was going to do a runner. Yeah. And I was looking into the distance, and I was actually having a little private cry, and I was just embarrassed to do that in front of people. And
Yeah.
and as a result of that, I felt so stiff and really wound up. And actually, going through the illness of last year, I've realized that that's a great mechanism for releasing the stress, because you always feel better after it, right?
Yeah.
You have the moment where I used to scream and the tears, but
Well, it happens in nature. If you think about, like, when you've been in a country, like, I've visited somewhere like Florida a few times, Ciaran, you can actually feel it. The day before there's going to be a thunderstorm. It's just the air is heavier. So it's almost like a natural principle. And the older I'm getting, I'm realizing how we're all quite in sync with, like, Mother Nature. No, I'm not a hippie now. I'm still a cap.
no, you're
I'm
right.
still a capitalist. Don't worry, I'm not a
Yeah.
hippie, right? But, like, I actually think there's a lot to that, and I think you got to have that conversation with yourself. Like, I've learned to as well, and I've learned a lot from speaking to you over the last year. Being in your corner as you've gone through some of this stuff, but, like, really just listen to yourself. But obviously be situational in the moment of something you're trying to get over, and not let that challenge or problem or feeling that's in the moment become the overall outlook, because you still need to see over like, it's hard sometimes, but you got to try and be purposeful and trying to see over the current situation.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I always said like that pain is like rain that passes,
Yeah.
And everything passes. I
Yeah.
remember being in that hospital bed, and God, it was a moment. It was tough. It was really tough, but it passes,
Yeah.
and later that afternoon, or a couple of days later, maybe in some cases, but it does pass. And,
Yeah.
life is transient, and moments of struggle are transient. But you can definitely speed it up by helping people, by being open to helping people. But you're absolutely right. Like, you feel that it builds, and then it bursts,
Yeah.
and then you move on.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've definitely I've definitely I believe I've changed in that regard. And I no longer feel the need to get stressed about things and so on. I kind of acknowledge my emotion, and I allow it to be there, and then and I allow it then to pass on, and I don't feel the need to chase after it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really, there's some very interesting topics there, and that I think some of my colleagues, especially the younger ones coming up, would probably identify with. So, for example, your colleagues, and they might be in a room or preparing for a meeting with one of our biggest clients, and they'd have a speaking part in a presentation, and how do they manage the nerves? How do they prepare for that? And, like, some of the things you're saying, my advice is always be to, like, run through it, visualize yourself in the room doing it, so you're not thinking about these things for the first time. But also, have a conversation with yourself and say, yes, I'm nervous going into this.
That's the big deal I just closed.
Nice. But also just to be able to have that open dialogue with yourself, because sometimes if you're feeling an emotion, right, whether it's being nervous or feeling like you're not getting somewhere, if you start realizing your inner narrative is having that conversation, making you feel certain ways, it's almost like you put that voice to the side, and you can then sort of say to yourself, well, I know this is the bad negative voice that's happening to me. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah,
all. You must have. I mean, clearly you've developed a lot of perspective about being in those low moments and getting where you are today. So
yeah, you're right. And I mean, I'm while I'm talking to you, I'm distracted because I'm looking at my laptop at the notes I wrote to myself in hospital.
really,
And I actually, I wrote some notes, and like even just read out one or two. Like I have like, be positive, be patient, be committed, believe in myself, allow change in. And I had all these little kind of pep talks written to myself. And when I actually came out of hospital, I wrote about 100 pages. I got my thoughts down onto paper. But sometimes I go back and I read that to give myself that pep talk,
yeah,
and because sometimes I get those moments, and but going back to your point, Tony, about people doing presentations and the nerves and I think it's also important to realize that the people you're giving a presentation to are people.
mm-hmm.
And they've got the same hopes and aspirations as you do. And they've the same plans for their evenings, maybe, that you do. They want to go home to their partners and maybe walk their pets. And they're also trying to further their careers or to further their own personal situation in life. And that, you're speaking to them as people, and you're trying to communicate to them that, ultimately the proposition that you have is going to improve their life ultimately in some way. And I know that may sound a bit too high level, but I mean, that's ultimately, I'm coming from a software perspective when I talk about this and the solutions that I've tried to build for people over the years.
Yeah.
But if it's not going to make your life better, then what's the point of some of these
yeah, I don't think, if you look at the people who are successful over time, certainly in sales and marketing, Ciaran, they are only successful because they've gotten behind a mission or a product or a company that they really believe in. I've
Yeah.
seen over the years, like in 20 years of sort of being in sales and marketing, I've seen these kind of fly by night people who will flog anything and sell anything, and they're fast talking people, but I don't see them sustain. They're the type of people that I see who jump jobs and jump industries and jump everything because they've got almost like a kind of a short amount of hustler energy, but I don't see that sustain over time. And I have not met anyone who one would consider very successful or have a high net worth who's like that. They're all really embroiled in the mission, and then the mission is bigger than them and what they're presenting in the room. They're really just getting the point across of what the bigger picture is in the mission,
Yeah, and I guess that goes to the root of it. And what I would say is that this experience has kind of changed even my path of where I want to go in life. Because and someone said to me, you can be running down the path, but it's the wrong path you're on.
Yeah.
And maybe on reflection, some of the choices I had made in my business, it was the wrong path that I was on, even though I was running. And I feel that I feel now I have an opportunity to get back onto the right path. And funny enough, my wife is the same.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So why don't you look? I really appreciate the time.
Yeah.
We're over longer than we
I
thought.
know. I knew we would be
because the two of us talk so much, which is good.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could hear your story another million times because I mean, I loved you and respected you before you went through what you went through in the last 2 years.
Likewise,
and I've said this, just like my understanding of what kind of person you are, and just the outpouring of love you had. I mean, you must have really got a sense of what people thought of you and how important you were to people as they really rallied around you over the last 2 years.
It was the single greatest thing I've got, not just in this, but in life.
Yeah.
And to see that love and to experience that was the greatest gift that I've ever received. And it was incredibly touching and moving. It's still, I find it incredibly touching and moving. And I'm extremely grateful, and I'm humbled, and I'm grateful every day. And it's something that I wasn't just in that moment. I've since then, I've thankfully carried that sense of gratitude with me. And you know, I believe that, and in these difficult times, we're seeing that that people are inherently good and are there for each other. And so, you know, it's important that we, I guess, share the love.
Yeah, it's good. Well, look, just on that point, I think you've got an exciting project on the go. Do you want to tell people, people, all
Yeah.
all my subscribers? I think there's about 24 of them.
Well, you know, it's start somewhere.
Yeah. But I mean, I'd love you to tell people about the head plan, because I actually think the head plan is something, and if it's not exactly your product, the kind of the process of it and the purposefulness of it is something that people should really consider, especially if they're going into some uncertainty with their job and their career, etc.
Yeah, like it's really cool. It's actually the genesis of my wife, Denise, and she's always been into guided journaling, setting out your goals and your ambitions in around lots of different facets of your life. And you know, right now, what's important to you, she believes, write it down on a pen and paper, in a journal, and that will enable you to achieve those goals. And you know what had happened was Denise was on her career path, which was in the corporate sector, and I was on mine. And when I got sick, it threw us off kilter, as I said, and we had to go back and reevaluate what was important to us in life, and that process helped us realign in terms of our goals and what we wanted out of life. And actually, one of the things that we found was that Denise's process of putting that down was very good, and it really worked. And so Denise decided, and I could thankfully chip in and give a hand with some of the business side of things, to launch a product called the Head Plan, which is a wellness brand, and it really is based around, you know, the first product is guided journaling, and the ability to writing these things down to inspire you and to drive and to motivate you. And so that's going very, very well. She's got a good community. She sold out the first run of her journals, and she's got several other products in development, which I'm giving a hand developing. But it's good, because what I like about that business, and I won't delay too long, is that there's a greater sense of really fulfillment when you get the feedback from people who are using that to help them get maybe out of a funk and to set some direction on their life and set some goals. So it's been really, really positive, and it's lovely to turn the year of illness into a positive little business venture, you know. So it's been really positive.
Well, I know a couple of people who've got it, and actually the first time we tried to get it was sold out, right? So it's obviously doing really well.
Correctly,
yeah. Well, I didn't want to be looking for a free copy.
VIP.
Yeah, but I mean, I do see that, Ciaran. I see lots on her. What's her Instagram handle? It's the Head Plan.
The Head Plan, and the headplan.com is where it's sold.
So when you follow that, you see how a lot of people who've used it and are incorporated into their life are actually tagging, you know, the Head Plan Instagram, you know, page. Page is the wrong thing. I'm showing my age.
No. Well, you know what's it's the thing about it is Denise is incredibly passionate about helping people, and we even released like a free PDF download, digital download, which was just a snippet of the Head Plan to help people in this climate who couldn't get their hands maybe on a journal to write things down. And she's incredibly passionate, and actually we both are about helping people and paying it forward. And when some of the private messages you get on Instagram, and I reached out to people privately on Instagram, and they were really able to help me, and they still do. And some of the people we've been able to help, it's fantastic, and it's really uplifting. And there's absolutely no like, what more could you want in a business venture then to help someone in their daily lives in such a fundamental way, it really is an absolutely beautiful thing to be able to do. So we're very privileged to be able to do that with the product.
Well, that's great. And I mean, just back on what we were saying, just about what I said about the people that I've met in business over like 20 years who are selling things they don't believe in, or they're just selling it to make a commission, or they're starting something to just for their own short-term gain. Really what you want to do is find something to be behind in terms of a mission that's much bigger than what yourself. So if you're like in our industry, in our company, Ciaran, it's about finding talent and then putting them on ladders that, maybe they're doing something else. And that's the biggest kick for me. When I find somebody who turns out to be a rock star in our organization, and you look at their resume and it just was something that wouldn't have led you to believe that this person will be a great manager, great leader. And that for me now is actually the biggest kick. Yes, look, if they do well, our customers will spend more, we'll probably win more customers, we'll all make more money, great. But I think if we had the outlook of that being the intention, it probably wouldn't work the way we've managed to make it work over the last few years. So that's similar point.
Yeah, you've got to believe in what you're doing at a deep level, and at the times we started this conversation with coming out of the recession last time, starting a business, and even now where we are, and it's nearly like we're coming back to the start. I guess the one thing that for me that stays the same in terms of business is I've always believed that I could offer value to help someone, or to bring a smile to their face, or to, in the software business and the products I was delivering. I always just felt that I could make some little difference to people. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been doing it. And I think that goes even for, you talk about people if they're selling or presenting, and I would hazard a guess that the people who do tend to do well in those situations, they genuinely do believe in what they're doing,
Of course they do.
And they should do, because ultimately people do get benefit from that stuff,
What do you think is the economic outlook? How long, everyone's got an opinion now, or starting to form an opinion. My hope is that like the economy here, there was nothing wrong. It was a little bit overcooked a little bit. We had some challenges around, places to live and the rental market, which, made cost of living a little bit higher than it should have been. But I think the fundamentals of the economy here, and to maybe some degree in the United States, they were fundamentally pretty solid. And I think they're just frozen. So it'll be interesting now to see what's the long-term effect of trying to thaw them out on the process there. But I think fundamentally what was an opportunity to, before this, will fundamentally be an opportunity in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the 2008 crash, there were fundamental issues across the financial system, which were exposed, and the system broke down. But I also think that over the past 12 years since then, that there's still been a sense that maybe we hadn't tackled those problems to the full extent that they needed to be tackled. It was like we needed a giant reset, and we needed a kind of I'm particularly more in Europe. We needed more significant interventions by the likes of the EU, and I think now we're getting that. I think there's a lot more unity now, because it's a global problem, to kickstart the economies of the world. Whereas in the past, I feel maybe unfairly, some countries were kind of isolated in how they got out of the financial situations. I think now that can't happen. I think it's we're in this together, and so I think that we've seen in Europe and in the US, the financial stimulus packages are very significant. And I hope that what it does do is, I hope it leads to a rethink of how we work. I believe the opportunities are still going to be there. I believe there's always fantastic opportunities. Somebody always makes money. And I think that, this can be a really exciting time. if we approach it in the right way. And I'm hopeful that we will. I'm hopeful that people will maybe move forward looking at business slightly differently, and maybe we were just getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in our work-life balance and in the sense of where the world was going, and maybe this is an opportunity to reset some of those things, and to put in place a more sustainable future for all of us, but I certainly don't think it's going to be like 2008. I think that there's going to be quite a significant bounce in a shorter time frame.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's going to be a shallow view. I also agree with what you said there. Working is going to change. I think that a lot of the technology that's out there is going to enable it the way you couldn't have enabled it before. I think our developing skills of being able to have conversations like this and present ideas and get work done between people who don't need to sit beside each other in cubicles. I think we're going to be forced into, or we're being enabled to work in ways that probably we would have gone at slower. Now we've had no choice. We've all had to just deploy remotely and all that kind of stuff. And I think that will create further new ways of working and new opportunities for sure. So look, I'm excited about the future. I'm always excited. Like you, purposefully optimistic, and there will be challenges. I go back to what you said there, that like pain, or difficult circumstances like the rain, it'll build up, it'll could pour down heavy for a period of time, but the sun will break through the clouds, and we'll all move forward.
Well, let me just finish by saying, don't be the person that comes out of this situation after having done nothing. I mean, you've got an opportunity now to think about things, to read, to explore new hobbies, and to spend time with the people who matter most to you. Don't be the person who comes out of this and when the sun comes out again, and you know what, you did nothing with this period of time, because that would be an awful shame.
You would. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm even with Lily, I'm getting more time in a different way than we would have had between juggling things or just being on holidays together. So I'm good. Well, look, Ciaran, that was a great conversation.
Yeah, enjoyed that. Yeah,
and some of those topics we've discussed before, but like I said, I could hear your story and your outlook. I'm truly lucky to have you as a friend and have worked together with you and learned so much together, and really you've really inspired me with your overcoming what you've overcome, and your mindset and your dignity is the way I describe it, of how you handle yourself all the way through it.
Really,
to be very honest with you.
It's very
no
nice.
problem.
Likewise, I went well over on the time.
I know, it's almost like a Joe Rogan podcast now. I thought it'd be a nice little blog, but should have known. It was too big mouth.
Should have known. You know me too well at this stage.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. We'll be in touch. Thanks for your time today, and we'll push anyone who's interested over to the Head Plan to check it out.
Yeah, stay safe and keep smiling.
Okay, buddy. Wash your hands.
Will
Talk
do.
soon. Cheers.
Bye bye.